Hello and welcome to the Stray and Hammy podcast. Today is Thursday, March 23rd. My name is Mark.
I'm Rex.
And I'm Travis.
Today we're going to talk about the Mavericks, we're going to talk about the Rangers, and we're even going to talk about the Cowboys. So let's get right to it. Dwight Howard is reportedly interested in the Mavs. Should the Mavericks be interested in him?
No. Simply put, I'm not interested in Dwight Howard, and it doesn't have. It's not the drama and everything that everybody always puts around Dwight Howard as far as, oh, he's a coach killer, oh, he doesn't like being on. Some people say he doesn't like playing basketball with other people. I don't have anything to do with that. I just don't think Dwight Howard fixes your problem by himself. I don't think he comes to Dallas if Chris Paul doesn't tell him, hey, let's go to Dallas. Because all the advantages that Dallas has with the state income tax and things of that nature, Houston already also has. And they have James Harden. They have Jeremy Lin on too big a contract, but they have Chandler Parsons, who's going to make nothing for the next 4 years. So they're loaded, and it's a much better situation for Dwight to go in, and it's a situation that matches his skill set. When Dwight Howard was at his best, he was in Orlando, and he had a bunch of three-point shooters around him, and he would be plug-and-play right in Houston with that. Dallas has a couple of good three-point shooters, but Dirk's more of a mid-range guy. Vince Carter is a three-point shooter, but no one else is here other than Vince and Sean Marion, and Marion's not going to catch in the corner and make a lot of shots. So if I was Dwight Howard and Chris Paul didn't call me and say, hey, let's go to Dallas and have some fun, and you'll catch lots of alley-oops, and then when you don't, I'll pass it to Dirk and he'll score, then I would say, well, let me go to Houston because that's the team that fits my skill set.
But if you're the Mavericks, you got to say at least you're giving him the 4-year, $87 million contract offer. And the reason I say that, I mean, you're talking about a guy who was unhappy for the majority of this year and still put up 17 points, 12 rebounds, almost 3 blocks a game. He just came out today. He was first team All-Pro center.
Yeah, and he was unhealthy for a good part of the year too. Yeah. So
given all that, he still was first team All-Pro. He's arguably the best center in the league right now. That's a good piece to have. You got to at least offer him the contract and try to make it work.
Yeah, the question was, should you be interested? And you don't think they should be interested at all? I mean, I guess you're thinking in sensical terms, I guess.
Well, let me put it this way. If it's Chris Paul and Dwight Howard, I'm very interested.
Yes.
Obviously. There's no reason to not be at that point. But I don't think Dwight Howard fixes your problems. And I think if you look at what Cuban and Donnie Nelson do best, who's the big acquisition that they've had in their history of the Mavericks? It's Dirk and a draft day trade. But everybody else has been... I mean, who was excited when Michael Finley was traded here? Nobody. Everybody was really mad because Kidd was leaving. Yeah. Who was excited when Steve Nash came here? Everybody hated Steve Nash for a year and a half. Who was excited when Jason Terry signed or was traded here? Nobody. They take B players who are A- players and in the wrong situation. That's what they're best at. If you look, literally, I'll go down the list. In the last 10 years, they've got Finley, Nash, Jameson, Jason Terry, Jason Kidd past his prime, and Tyson Chandler. None of those guys were thought to be elite players.
Well, and Marion and Carter not past their prime, but on the downside.
Marion and Carter also pretty good examples of it. When Marion was traded for and then signed to an extension,
right.
I almost puked that day because Sean Marion was mailing it in so hard in Toronto and in Miami in the 2 previous years. I didn't want to have anything to do with the guy. And he came here and fit the system and was perfect and was a huge part of a championship team. So I think what the Dallas Mavericks do best is identify guys who play with Dirk really well, play in their system really well, and can translate their games from, like I said, from B player games to A- player games. I think when you start to change what you do and who you are, And let's face it, Rick Carlisle's not going to do that. Rick Carlisle plays a certain type of basketball. Mm-hmm. So if Dwight Howard comes in here and doesn't want to play that type of basketball, which I think it would suit him a lot better than D'Antoni's system. So I'm not saying that. And defensively, it would be perfect for him. But I think that when you start really messing with the core of your team, and that's what you do when you sign superstars, it can go horribly wrong, like it went for the Lakers this year.
Well, absolutely, there's that potential. But I think if you look at what is a reasonable proposition, so yeah, Chris Paul and Dwight Howard would be awesome, but it's not realistic. You could probably get one of the guys. It will be difficult to get one of them without the other being on board as well, according to rumors. But I think just from a standpoint of if you're the Mavericks, can you get both guys? Probably not. So you go for one. So between those two guys, you're going to have to fill the other position. If you get a center, Dwight Howard, you're going to have to get a point guard somewhere else. Yeah, and if you get Chris Paul, you're going to have to get a center somewhere else. So which one of those is easier to get if you don't get the superstar? In my opinion, if you get Dwight Howard, it's easier to find a point guard because the draft is so deep in point guards this year. Starting caliber NBA point guards. Yeah. The problem is the Mavericks draft terribly. So they could probably blow that and probably will blow that. So I think get Dwight Howard to blow the point guard spot. But I think it's easier to get a starting caliber point guard in this year's draft, or, I mean, maybe somewhere else, than to sign both of them or to get Chris Paul and try to find a center. Name a center that's going to be available at 13 that can come in and start day one in the draft. Nobody.
I mean, maybe Cody Zeller.
Not really.
He's better than all the other Zeller brothers, and they're all in the NBA playing.
He doesn't have the same potential as NBA quality as some of the guards do.
Yeah, no, kid. A lot of people have been talking about Carter Williams at 13, and he's a potential starter at point guard, and that would be great. But what I'm saying is, if you get Dwight Howard to go along with Dirk, let's say you get to keep Marion. And you get, you probably have to trade Vince for salary reasons if you keep Carter Williams. If you do that, are you exponentially better? I mean, you probably are than you were this year. But are you exponentially better than Utah? Or
I think you're in a position
Minnesota
to knock them out of playoff spots. Because I think Carter Williams... or any other drafted point guard is, especially a player who plays like Carter Williams. He's a distributor. That's something that Darren Collison couldn't do.
Yeah, but you're asking a rookie point guard to come in and
on a veteran team.
Yeah, but you're asking him to be Tony Parker, essentially. You know, maybe not score as much, but you're asking him to come in and do what Tony Parker did on that Spurs team, and I think it's difficult.
I'm sure it is difficult, and I know point guard is the quarterback of basketball. It's not the easiest position to play, but if you have a guy whose game is built around distributing the ball, you're not asking him to score. And it doesn't matter who it is, if it's Carter Williams, but if it's a guy that is more comfortable passing the ball than scoring the ball, I think that's an easier transition.
Yeah, that's
you ask a guy to say, come in here and we need you to take over games and score. That's a hard transition. If you say, we need you to come in and find Sean Marion, Dwight Howard, and Dirk Nowitzki, and give them the ball and let them do their thing, that's an easier transition for a point guard.
I mean, obviously. And I think defensively they would be a great deal better because Carter Williams can actually guard a human like Darren Collison. And Dwight Howard changes your defensive everything immediately. So it would be great, but I just don't see the point in wasting a whole lot of time in it because I don't see the appeal for him. I would definitely call his agent and say, hey, would you be interested?
Now,
because you have to make that call.
If you flip the script and take a look from Dwight Howard's point of view, I definitely agree with you that Dallas wouldn't be my number one choice.
But here's my point. If I'm Cuban or if I'm Dirk and I'm going on my recruiting tour come June 1st, I'm going to Al Jefferson's house. I'm going to, I'm making calls to Golden State and saying, hey, you guys' cap situation is getting crazy, and while we're here, we're going to talk to Jared Jack. Um, I'm serious, and I'm going to find out what Utah wants to do, and I'm going to, whether it's Millsap or Jefferson, I'm going to put feelers out there. Obviously, much more interested in Jefferson.
Yeah.
But I'm going to do things. My priorities are going to lay other places but Dwight Howard. What I'm doing with Dwight Howard is
Shark Tank?
No, not Shark Tank. Definitely not Shark Tank. But you have to get better. You have to get better right now, because Dirk's got, 3 years left maybe. So you don't have a whole lot. You don't have 2 seasons to really bring a young point guard along. Your best case scenario with Carter Williams would be to sign Mo Williams and put him behind him, and say, okay, for 20 minutes a night, you're going to change the game for us. But when it comes to the fourth quarter, we're not going to have another Darren Collison situation where you can't figure out who the tall German is in the last 2 minutes.
And doesn't that immediately make you a better team, though, too? You're kind of making an argument against yourself for me.
What do you say?
I'm asking for a point guard to be the lesser priority because I think they're easier to find. So if you went out and got Mo Williams and a rookie and you split the time with them, aren't you more confident in that combination than Darren Collison last year?
Yes, because I would be more confident with any situation than Darren Collison.
So why wouldn't you then automatically be more interested in Dwight Howard than Chris Paul?
Because Chris Paul costs less. You get to keep Sean Marion and Vince Carter. I believe a little bit in Brendan Wright. I think you can find, maybe not, you can't find Dwight Howard, but you can find a big in the draft. And if you sign Chris Paul, Cuban, I think, is a lot less worried about going over the luxury tax.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can use your mid-level exception, which they still have the full one because they're not in the tax yet. You can maybe move Marion for a different, more offensive-minded piece. There's a lot of things you could do at that point. And I think Chris Paul and Dirk, I think anybody making life easy on Dirk scoring the basketball is deadly. We saw that with Jason Kidd and Jason Terry.
Yeah.
Dirk was unstoppable with anybody that could just find him in the right spots. It's not even, it was nice when Terry would take a little attention away from him. But Kidd ran that 2-man game away with him, and everybody in the gym knew that Kidd wasn't going to take a shot. And it didn't matter if you got Dirk the ball in the right spots that he was comfortable, spots where the floor spacing was okay, and he wasn't having to pass over 4 guys to hit the guy in the corner if he got doubled. The game just really changes. And so I think Dwight Howard would be great. I think Chris Paul's a better player if I had to choose between the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think that cumulatively, Al Jefferson and a quality, Jason Terry level player makes you better than Dwight Howard by himself. And I think that that's feasible with the cap space the Mavericks have.
And they're all valid points. My only fallback is where we're at in today's game is that who's available and what can you get. It's harder to find a good center right now than it is a good point guard right now.
Yeah, but you don't have 4 years to build a team is my thing. If Dirk was 27, I would say absolutely go get Dwight Howard and then we'll figure out the rest of the team because these two are unbelievable.
Yeah.
But I think you've got to get back to championship level, which means you have to be 8 or 9 deep, legitimately, within the next.
And you're saying you can
2
get
years.
more of those guys to help with that depth if you go the CP3 route.
I feel like Al Jefferson is less of a step down from Dwight Howard cumulatively than if I can get 2 other solid players, like one B-level player, let's say an OJ Mayo type, hopefully a little bit better than what he showed at the end of the year. But say an OJ Mayo type, and then just a solid NBA player. Those guys that go from team to team that make plays that don't get paid. I would take Nate Robinson all day. I don't know if somebody's going to give him stupid J.J. Barea money after what he did in the playoffs, and they may.
Possible, man.
But that guy was a minimum player this year. If you could get him at $3 million a year, like Jason Kidd's contract, and that's the biggest thing to me is I want to see the Mavericks commit to guys this year. If they do, I don't want to see another. Okay, we went in off for Dwight Howard and went all in for Chris Paul, and we swung and missed, and so we're going to sign a bunch of one-year guys, and we're going to see who's
bring
there
back
next year.
Kamen and Brand on some one-year
If Chris
deals.
Kamen is anywhere in the Metroplex, I will be.
I think he likes it here.
No, I do too, and I like Chris Kamen. I actually like him as a basketball player. Rick Carlisle doesn't at all, and so I just want to see commitments to whatever direction they go to. I want commitments there, and I think it's better to spend the $20 million you have in cap room on 3 guys, as long as one of them is really, really quality. Like an Al Jefferson he's a great NBA player. He's not maybe a max player. He's a great NBA player. Rather than going Dwight Howard, here's our entire checkbook, and we get to bring Darren Collison back and see how that looks. And it'll look better, but not great.
And those are all good points. I'm afraid that our Mavericks front office isn't that savvy, and that we'll end up with a bunch of one-year contracts again. But we have the offseason to find out, and I think we'll check out how the Rangers front office has handled their team and compare next.
All right, we're back on the Stray and Hammy podcast. The Rangers are off to a pretty good start, despite not a lot of things going well for them. They're still getting a lot of W's in the win column. Ian Kinsler recently went on the DL, but that was probably the most excited anybody's ever been for like the best. Yeah, because Jerks and Profar is up, so that's exciting. Top prospect in all of MLB.
Best name in the bigs.
Yeah.
Solid name.
Yep. Yeah. He's already had a couple spectacular plays. Actually, one over at first where it looked like he strained both groins terribly.
On bunt coverage, nonetheless.
Yeah. But a lot of things going well for the Rangers. They're persevering through injuries. Got some good pitching performances from some young guys. The question I think that isn't too ridiculous to start thinking about right now is how far can this team go? Can it win the World Series? I guess we should start. Can it win the ALCS?
Yeah.
Let's dial it back a little bit here, Mark.
Can they get into the playoffs?
Yeah. I guess I've kind of already put that in my head.
Yeah, at this point, you almost think of it as a foregone conclusion, which is funny because all 3 of us we're thinking they might miss the playoffs to start the year, or at best they're playing in that wild card playoff game.
Yeah, I don't want to go back to that podcast.
And let's not draw the conclusions too early. I mean, this is 25% into the season. They have last year they were in the same boat. They had a sizable lead early in the season, and then they forgot to play baseball the last 2 weeks. And almost missed the playoffs, and then they lost in the one-game playoffs. So
yeah, the difference, though, I think, is they don't have the giant Josh Hamilton anchor for the last half of the season this year. I feel like they have all good clubhouse guys, and they also don't have worn-down Michael Young.
I'm certainly hoping that that's not the case, but it's happened before.
Yeah,
they only moved a few guys out that were involved in that team, so it's still like the same nucleus. So is it going to be a big difference? Maybe, because the 2 guys they moved out were 30-plus players, and the guys they moved in are like 25. So fresh legs, maybe they last longer. So it's certainly a possibility, and I certainly hope they don't fade. I think one of the things that should provide positive is that as the season goes on, we should start getting some of the healthy pitching back. Mm-hmm. And I think what's been impressive, the most impressive, is the pitching up to this point. So even with the injuries to Harrison, and Olgando's on a 15-day DL now, and Colby Lewis is out, Martin Perez was a starter, Natalie Feliz was a starter, all those guys are out, and we've had 4 rookies pitchers start this season,
and all Ron Wolf won a game.
Yeah, he's a 12-year veteran rookie, and he pitched well, got a W. So that's the most impressive thing, is that they have been pitching well and consistently, and despite the bats being inconsistent so far this season, I think the bats will pick up. I think David Murphy's coming around. He's finally hitting in the 200s.
Yeah.
And
I feel like a lot of the bats have already come around.
Yeah, I mean,
they're settling in.
bats kind of come and go. And I think Ron Washington said as much today in a press conference. He said, bats come and go, but pitching's what really carries you. Pitching and defense is what really carries you forward. Yeah, they have had really good pitching up until now, but just like you were talking about, how we are going to start getting those healthy guys back. That's kind of makes me nervous because we are assuming that those guys are going to pitch at the level that we expect them to, and just there's that little bit of uncertainty in the back of my mind. And maybe I should place more trust in our guys to know if those guys are truly ready or not. But that's just in the back of my mind that we get Colby Lewis back, or we get Harrison back, or Feliz or something, Ogando, and they're not right, and it kind of messes with the rotation a little bit and throws a little wrench into things. But
and I'm pretty sure that I think the management will stick with the best pitcher, and I think you kind of saw that in the preseason. Grimm and Tepish were competing for the 5th spot up until the last game, and so granted that there was an injury in preseason that helped. Martin Perez that helped put them in that position, but until that point, I mean, it was a 3-way battle with Martin Perez, so there was no guarantee. So those guys were already in the hunt. So I think that being the case, and Colby was a bullpen guy before he was a starter 2 years ago, so it wouldn't be out of place for them to go that route. If Colby's not pitching up to starter potential, or Perez comes back and maybe he's not 100%, I don't think it would be against the style to keep Perez in Double A or Triple A and let him get his kinks worked out from injury, and put Colby in the bullpen and let him figure some things out while Tepish and Grimm still grow as young starters. I don't think it would be far-fetched. No. I mean, we're seeing it with Leonis Martin, who's figured out his pro bat. Mm-hmm. The bat we saw in the minor leagues, he's showing in the pros, and he's getting more playing time in the bigs because of it. Mm-hmm. And he's a solid defensive center fielder, and same with Jerickson Profar. I mean, an injury helped it out, but he's getting the starts and he's playing well.
Yeah.
So I think they'll go with the player that's playing the best, and especially in the pitching. If these guys are consistently pitching, they'll go with them.
Yeah, you're right. I probably should place a little more trust in this organization, but I'm just in the back of my mind to be a worrywart.
The skeptical historical Ranger fan.
Hurt guys are hurt guys. I think that's something I don't want to just gloss over, though, is that Leonis Martin and Mitch Moreland have been much more than expected up to this point.
Yeah. Well, certainly considering the start to the season where they were dragging the lineup down. Now they're boosting it.
Yeah, you thought maybe this was going to be a failed experiment.
We were talking about trying to get a first baseman.
Exactly. And I'm glad you brought up Mitch Moreland, because that's another guy who's he's getting playing time against left-handed pitchers, right-handed pitchers, doesn't matter.
And he's hitting those guys.
Yeah, Washington is he's got confidence in him, and he's letting him play first and just slipping the DH out.
Yeah,
I mean, I think the other day we saw David Murphy as a DH, so
which isn't a bad spot for him.
Yeah,
no, if he's not in the field, I'm okay with that. But
he's a better defender than Nelson Cruz. But
all right, so I think we all have the Rangers in the playoffs now, which we didn't to start the year.
Yeah.
So say they're not in the wild card, they're just in the baseball playoffs proper. What kind of confidence do you have that this team can win a playoff series? And from there we'll pray and cross our fingers. What do you think their chances of winning a playoff series in the
some of the teams that they're looking at? I mean, obviously we're way out from the playoffs, but some of the teams that are in that conversation as far as first round opponents, Red Sox and Yankees, which are a likely scenario for the first round winning any games. But I don't know. They have. You want to talk about injuries?
Yeah.
And then the Tigers are up there in the conversation, and pretty much if you look at the matchups, we haven't played the Yankees yet, but if you look at the matchups between some of the better teams, we've got a really good record against those teams, and there's no excuses. I mean, it's not like they had their best pitchers out or their best hitters or anything like that. I mean, we played the Red Sox against their best pitchers, except for
Lester.
Yeah. And
they were in the midst
or
of
in
their
Buchholz. We missed Buchholz.
Yeah, but they were in the midst of their tear. I mean, they were at that point the best team in baseball, and then we knocked them off. They went 2-9 after they faced us. I think. Right. So. And
we won 3 out of 4 against the Tigers at their place, and we took on Verlander, knocked him out. So we've played well against the better competition. So as far as meeting those teams in the playoffs. Are we going to sweep them? No, but I feel confident with our chances. I mean, we didn't sweep anybody in the 2 World Series runs. I think we swept the Yankees. No, Yankees was 4-1, right?
4-1. They lost Game 5, I think.
So, we won Game 4, and then they won Game 5.
Sorry. Getting my games mixed up.
The question I have, and I don't think the Rangers have lost more than 2 games in a row at any point this season. So that's good. Like if they can somehow keep some semblance of that going, it's hard to beat a team in a series if you can't ever beat them twice in a row. But my question to you guys would be, who is the 3 or 4 guys you trust to start in the playoffs on this team right now? And like, who would the guy
guys?
Yeah, who would the guy coming back be that you think, okay, I can trust this guy to come in and be a starter in the playoffs for me? Because the rotation we have now, I'm looking at you and Holland, which is a little scary in himself if he's being weird.
Yeah.
And then the third guy
is a question mark.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I trust Tepish. I don't know if I definitely don't trust Grimm right now in a playoff series. Mm-hmm. So who are the guys you think can win the games?
I think those are fair points. And if you have to go with just the starters, Tepish is the current starters. Tepish is that guy that moves into that spot, but it's by default. He's the best of the remaining 3 because you have Tepish, Grimm, and then rotational guy. That could be Wolf. It could be whoever.
Help us with this Wolf.
So,
I don't think he's putting Wolf in the playoff rotation.
I don't think he is either.
But
I think what the idea is, you're hoping on some guys getting back. So Ogando should be back after another week or 2. Harrison should be back after the All-Star break. Martin Perez should be coming back after or probably just before the All-Star break. Colby Lewis is kind of in that same area. These are all guys that could start. Of that group of guys, I put my faith in probably Harrison, Ogando, and Perez.
I think it's got to be Harrison. Ogando's...
Well, as the bottom 3 guys in rotation. I don't know which order. I would say Harrison if he's pitching like... Yeah. His injury is not bothering him. I think Ogando has the best recovery because his injury was the most minor, and he was pitching well before. So he has the quickest road to recovery. So I kind of like that aspect of it. Perez and Harrison's injuries were significant enough to say let's ease back into it.
So who's your 3 or 4 mark?
Definitely you, obviously. I guess Holland.
The guy that we trade Holland for.
yeah. And I mean, for that 3rd spot, it's just so contingent on like who's right at that point. Like who is coming back from their injury. Just like Rex was saying.
But you've got to be praying for. To me, you've got to be praying for Harrison to be healthy because Ogando can like.
Yeah.
Does he have enough to trust him in a playoff game?
Yeah, Ogando is like effectively wild. I don't think that's something you want to be effective with that, Like, I want you to be effectively controlled and composed and all that, but...
It might not be bad as your 4th starter if you've already established a couple of wins in the first...
won the 3 games to start.
Yeah. But, obviously, I think Colby, even when he's right, obviously in this playoffs, his playoff history, he's been awesome. But he's a fly ball pitcher.
Yeah.
And that scares the S out of me. So I want a guy that's going to get ground balls. That's Harrison.
Yeah.
If he's right. So, it would be you, Holland, and Harrison. Maybe, and if Harrison's really right, flip Holland and Harrison, depending on road, home and away,
Yeah.
Stuff like that. So, but, I didn't really get to put my 2 cents in the basket. I think the Rangers can go to the World Series this year.
As presently constructed.
They can win the ALCS. Just like Rex was saying, nobody in the AL really scares me against this team. when they're right, and I'm kind of assuming that they're going to be right. Everything's going to, they'll get their guys back from injury. Everybody's going to come back okay. I don't know if they'll win the World Series because the Cardinals are there. And
man, I'll tell you what, we deserve one.
Yeah, dude, I would love for it to be like a Mavericks Heat thing where we come back and
beat the team that beat.
I think Frank owes us one as the not best team in the series to win it. Yeah.
The Sports Illustrated article this week, the cover story, just tore me up because it was about the Cardinals, and it said, despite injuries and despite big free agent losses, the Cardinals are the baseball's model organization. If we win one more game in 2011, that cover article is about us and about the Rangers. So hopefully they can write a new story.
Well, they are having mirrored seasons as far as progression, and I think they're on the road to meet in the World Series. So I hope they do. I hope we come out victorious this time, or else I'm just going to cry for a couple weeks. Yeah. So.
All right, when we come back, we're going to talk about the Cowboys and see if Jerry Jones might be learning a little bit and correcting some past mistakes. Back with you on the Stray and Hammy podcast, Mark, Travis, and Rex. All right, guys, sounds like the Cowboys are finally making some progress on cleaning up some bad contracts. You guys want to break that down while I step out for about 15 minutes?
Yeah. So this draft, a lot of people complain about it as far as not being offensive linemen having enough. But I think over the course of this offseason, the Cowboys have done quite a bit to try to clean up some bad contracts they have on their team. The two worst contracts on the team that weren't Doug-free were Miles Austin, who, while he's a productive player, is not the number one receiver they paid him to be, and Orlando Scandrick, who they paid to be a starting corner and has never been more than a slot corner for him, and is kind of a marginal slot corner who has a bit of a grabbing problem as well. So in this year's draft, they addressed both of those situations. Terrence Williams was drafted in the third round, was a really good value in the third round, and could very well be your number two receiver going forward. And he would be a much cheaper option at the number two receiver, not this season, but next season if he grows into that role, with Harris sliding into the slot receiver position. But he would be a much cheaper option at that number two receiver and free up lots of money so you can give Des Bryant number one receiver money, which is important here shortly. And then B.W. Webb is a small school player, kind of unproven, but definitely has the athleticism and the skill set to be a slot corner in the Tampa 2 defense. And so you could see him grow into that role and win that role maybe even by the end of this season, which makes it really easy to then cut Scandrick and his giant bloated contract in the season coming after next. You also have Gavin Escobar was drafted in the second round, confused a lot of people. Jason Witten is on big money for a long time. And while I want Jason Witten to be the Jay Novacek of this Cowboys team, I can see a point in 2 or 3 years down the road where his services are less valuable than his contract. And Gavin Escobar would be a cheaper alternative there, and is a player who should be able to, if he develops properly, not be Jason Witten, but be Jason Witten-like. And fill some of the
replace
same roles.
his production.
Or
close to it.
Yeah, just replace a percentage of his production. Yeah, Jason Witten is an incredible player, so I'm not trying to run him out of town by any means. The one player that I do think is a little easier to replace, who's a big part of the Cowboys situation right now, DeMarco Murray is a good player, but he's also an injured player, and it hurts his overall production. And he's a player who, when it comes time for his second contract, let's say he stays healthy and he goes for 1,200 yards this year, which would be awesome, and he has another productive season after that, then he's going to be looking for, hey, my yards per carry are good my whole career, and I've had 2 productive seasons where I'm healthy, and you're going to be looking at paying a 29-year-old running back a big contract. The Cowboys in the past have said, yep, sign us up every time. Marion Barber got a good deal. They like paying their own players. With the Joseph Randle pick, they found another productive player who's similar to Murray, who can replace his production when he's hurt, which is important, and also if he's a productive player, is a good enough player that when it comes time for his second contract, they can say, we'll roll with Randall and draft another guy, and not give that huge contract to an injury-plagued 29-year-old player when running backs hit the wall at 30. This draft gives them a lot of options to be better against the cap going forward. The other big move they made, Doug Free had something crazy like $12 million against the cap this year, and if they cut him, just flat cut him, they owed him $3 million against the cap this year and $7 million in dead money next year. They reworked that deal to where it's a $3.5 million guaranteed deal, which is in line with what the best right tackles in free agency were getting, because his original contract he got as a left tackle, which is the silliest part of it. He's a bad right tackle. He got left tackle money. But he got in line with the Claybos and the Winstons. He got that kind of money for this year, but at a much reduced salary for the Cowboys. And next year, he's got another 3.5, but none of it's guaranteed. So he can be cut after this season with no dead money against the cap, as opposed to the $7 million that would have been dead money against the cap. And they have an actual player instead of just cutting him and saying, Jeremy Parnell, have fun.
So I think those all line up to be good moves contractually, which is something we haven't seen from the Cowboys in a long time. I mean, they're in the cap space problem because of the salaries that they've signed, the contracts that they've signed in the past years, and that's something that, if that is the case, that they're trending that way, then I'm happy for that, because it means more flexibility in the future. When we initially had the draft, I didn't think that about the draft picks except for Terrence Williams. I thought immediately the first thing in my head was Miles Austin will not be on the team next year. So
one more year,
Terrence
Miles,
Williams, and not that I'm against Miles. He's injured, and he gets paid more money than Des Bryant. Des Bryant is astronomically better than Miles Austin. Yeah. So the writing was on the wall for Miles to be gone next year, and that was the only one that really jumped out at me. After the rookie mini camp and the first couple of days of OTAs this week, reading some of the scouting reports, Brian Bottas has some very good write-ups on DallasCowboys.com, and he's been very impressed with B.W. Webb.
Isn't that about a kid, yeah.
And one of the things that he said was not only does he think he can compete for the nickel spot now, he has potential to be a starting corner down the road. So this is a kid that he is, because of his size, built for a slot corner, but he's athletic enough that he can play.
Yeah, but he'd be taking jobs from pretty pedigreed players at that
right.
point.
Right, and to that point is, they always say you can never have enough corners. So when they drafted, I'm thinking, okay, you've got 4 quality corners now. But you're absolutely right. He is the type of guy that will force Skandrick out, and maybe that saves them cap room down the road. Yeah. The Escobar pick I thought was more of a replacement for Witten when Witten was ready to hang him up. Yeah. I don't know if the timing's going to work out. Is Witten going to be ready to hang it up when Escobar's ready to be the starter? Probably not. And if that's the case, does that mean that the Cowboys are going to be forced to cut Witten because Escobar's good enough to keep? Maybe. Escobar's got to develop, and Witten's got to figure it out where his career is going.
Yeah, and hopefully they'll be productive for 3 years in the 12 personnel together.
Right.
Yeah.
And that would be great. And that's yet to be seen. But I think that was my initial thought, was when Witten says goodbye, Escobar is your number 1 tight end, and he's developed to that point. Maybe Escobar forces Witten out, like you said, contractually, and that saves him cap room earlier than expected. Yeah. I don't know if I would be so against it, But I would hate to see Witten on another team, or if he wasn't ready to retire, be forced into an awkward, hey, we got to cut you kind of situation. So I hate to see that.
Situation.
Also, with the running back thing, and we've talked about that, is that running backs, unless you're one of the top 3 or 4 running backs in the league, you're replaceable.
Mm-hmm.
Ahmad Bradshaw was the number 1 running back for the Giants 3 years in a row, and they just said, we're not paying you that much money, see ya.
Yeah.
And they let him go. So that's kind of how running backs are nowadays in the league, and there's not a lot of Emmitt Smith, Barry Sanders running around where you can just pick a guy and say, this is my running back for the next 15 years.
Yeah.
However long. And that's
most of the time we're looking at
case.
5-6 years of production out of running back tops.
So now, moving on to the Doug Free contract, it's good because it saves him cap space. It's certainly team-friendly for next year. If he's not your starter this year, then obviously you're paying a lot of money for a swing tackle, I guess.
Yeah, but you're paying less than you would have been.
Yeah, and like I said, it's certainly friendlier to the team because even if you cut him, it still saves you more money. But I want to go down the line and see, with the Doug Free restructuring contract, who is your starting 5? And I'll give you mine, and then you can let me know what you think. And obviously, I think left tackle Tyron Smith is. We're not going to argue about who's going there.
No.
I do like Nate Livings at left guard. I think he can hold down the position. I think I would like to see some competition from some of the younger guys. I just think Livings will beat out anybody who's on the roster right now. I think Travis Frederick is your starting center, and I like that. I'm good with that. I like Costa, but I just think Frederick will fit in naturally as the better center, and I don't think Costa fits in at guard, which is unfortunate. I think he becomes your swing guy, guard, center, swing, which is fine. A game day backup with Phil Costa at guard or center, I'm good with that. I think the right guard position goes to Ron Leary. I think he has figured out some of his footwork in the offseason. Again, going back to some of the scouting reports from OTAs, and he was in rookie minicamp because he's a second-year player who qualified.
Sounds like he's in better shape than he came in last year as well.
Extremely strong, maybe the strongest lineman on the team right now, which is what you want in the middle. He's a big guy. He's not going to get pushed around. So I like him to win the starting right guard position, and I'm actually really, really comfortable with that. And then at the right tackle position, you're going to really, really hate what I'm about to say right now. I want Parnell to win the job. I don't think he's going to. I think he has a lot more figuring out how to play the position. And I really think that Doug Free is probably going to have some pressure lifted off of him with a newer contract, that he's actually going to settle in and kind of not return to his 2010 right tackle form where he was actually pretty good.
He's a good player, yeah.
But I think he'll be to a serviceable right tackle position, which at $3.5 million is not acceptable, but it's better than last year. And, and unfortunately, I think he wins the position because there's pressure lifted off of him, and I think he can kind of settle in and just be a right tackle. I would absolutely like to see Parnell win it. I just don't think he does. I think Doug Free wins it and plays better than last year.
Yeah, I think your best case scenario is Frederick, without a doubt, wins a starting job at the center position. And then either Costa or Leary wins that right guard position, and Bernardo can kind of be a swing guy because he can play both guard spots and center. And those, it's important to have depth in the offensive line because you're going to use probably 2 offensive linemen throughout the year that you didn't think you were going to use.
Right.
Last year, Parnell started games. Ryan Cook started games. I think Livings even missed a game, maybe at one point. And so, offensive linemen get hurt. They're in constant car wrecks, so it happens. But the main reason I want Parnell to win the job is I think he's good enough to play the position. I saw him out there on an island at left tackle against a pretty good defensive end, and he held his own. He's athletic enough to do it. He's strong enough to do it. At some point, you've got to stop making excuses for the fact that the guy was a power forward 5 years ago and start saying he's big enough, he's strong enough, he's fast enough, he's been playing football for 4 years with NFL coaching. Let's see what he's got. And they did that to a certain extent last year by platooning him through. So my thing with him is if he's good enough to take half of Doug Free snaps and Doug Free is as bad as he was last year, then he's good enough to take all of his snaps. But, yeah.
And he's more athletic than Doug Free, hands down.
But if Doug
And
Free
stronger.
was legitimately injured for the entirety of last year, because from snap one to the end of the year, Doug Free was the worst starter in football. And he had some decent second halves, and Jerry will say, well, when we were splitting his time, he had some good second halves. You paid him $58 million last year, something crazy. Not really 58, but 12. He should have been good all the time.
Yeah.
But if he returns to even 2011 form over at that right side, it's probably serviceable for the year.
Yeah.
But you still have to say
he's certainly gone next year. I don't think.
Yeah, you have to cut him next year, and you have to draft a right tackle if Parnell's not your answer, because Free's not going to be here.
Right.
The way they did the contract means Doug Free's gone after this season. We just want an insurance policy against Jeremy Parnell. So I say if Parnell wins that job, that's best case scenario. If Leary or Costa win that right tackle or right guard job, that's best case scenario. And yeah, you could have used more young offensive linemen. But the other thing is, the reason I like Costa more than Leary at that guard spot is, one, he started as a guard, he was a good enough guard. But two, if I have Parnell and Frederick winning jobs, that's two essentially rookies. Now Parnell's got
first year starters.
Yeah. But Frederick's a rookie, a smart rookie, but a rookie. So for continuity's sake, I'd like it if Costa could do the job. Now there's a chance he gets injured in 2 plays and it's Leary.
Yeah.
Like,
let me ask you a question real quick about offensive line and kind of calling plays and organizing it. As a former lineman and having a good passion for that, you probably have a better understanding. But my thought has always been if you have Frederick starting at center and you can put Costa at guard, you have two center-minded linemen playing in the interior line. And to me, it seems like that would be ideal because you have two guys that can recognize the defenses and call the plays. And obviously Frederick will handle the left side and Costa would handle the right. Frederick's ultimately the one making all the calls, but Costa can recognize, help out, feed it down to the right tackle, which right now we're assuming is probably the weakest spot on the line between Free and Parnell just because we don't know.
Yeah.
So my question is it more ideal to have that kind of mentality in more spots, or does it matter if the guard is...
No, it definitely helps if you have smart guards, and this is the reason why. Probably my biggest problem with Bernardo, he's athletic enough to be an NFL starting guard. Every once in a while, he just doesn't get out of his stance. And there were times they ran twist stunts on him and Ryan Cook all last year. Every time you saw pressure up the middle, it was either because Ryan Cook got ran over because he's too small, or because, and this is inside pressure. All the outside pressure just came because people ran around Doug Free unabated. But it was because they ran twist stunts and they didn't know how to pass off to each other. If you change Cook and Bernardo for Frederick and Costa, you stop all that immediately. Because all you have to do to get a pass off is hold up for 3.5 seconds. And so if you run a twist stunt and everybody gets their hands on the right guy, you got 3.5 seconds. Because it takes a second to run the stunt, and then all you have to do then is hold for 2 seconds because they're having to cross each other. Right. What they're saying is, we'll confuse you and you won't touch us. And with Bernardo and Cook last year, they could do that anytime they wanted. And somebody was coming free because somebody was going, what just happened? Did they switch places there? And Livings had a little bit of trouble with that too. And they used to actually get Tyron Smith his first year in the league. They'd run some what we used to call bear stunts, where a linebacker and a defensive end would trade spots, and the defensive end would go down, so obviously the guard engages him. Well, Tyron Smith is going there too and not realizing that there's a linebacker coming off the edge now. And so those inside twist stunts were killing the Cowboys last year. and Romo was constantly under pressure because of that and could never step up into the pocket with the outside rush coming because of the constant pressure that way. So Frederick and Costa would solve a lot of your problems with twist stunts on the line and also just any kind of stunt with a delayed blitz with a linebacker. Because of the intelligence of those players and the fact that they know the offensive line game, it would stop a lot of that. And so I think that's a kind of a best-case scenario deal.
So basically all things being equal between Leary and Costa as far as playing the spot.
Yeah.
Costa would be a more ideal fit at this point because of his center mentality and intelligence for the position. I'm not saying Leary's not smart enough to play guard, but he wasn't a center.
Yeah, the difference is, to your point earlier, all things are not equal with Costa and Leary. Leary is twice the athlete, strength, size to play guard that Costa is. It really is just going to come down to, can you really play the position that we want you for? And a lot of that has to do with just, are your knees okay? Because that's why he was passed over in the draft. He has no cartilages in his knees at all. So if he's healthy and can play, he should win that job from Costa, because Costa is undersized and has short arms and has a lot of things wrong with him. He's just good enough to play in the NFL. So if Leary's good enough to play in the NFL with his qualities, he'll take that job from Costa and, honestly, Bernardo.
Well, I think it's good to see, like I said, if the contract situations are actually headed in the right direction. That's good as a Cowboys fan that we want to see that.
Because it's been so bad so long.
And it gives them flexibility to actually put the best players in the right spots.
Yeah.
So, hopefully they get that worked out. Maybe they can work out a few other deals in the offseason that help them out. And then we'll see where it goes from there.
Yeah. Well, good talk, guys. All right, thanks for joining us on the Stray and Hammy podcast. Remember to go to the site, strayandhammy.com, and follow us on Twitter @strayandhammy. If you enjoyed the podcast, make sure to share it with your friends, please. Thanks for listening.
We love it.